Here we back. Yeah, we back. Now today, man, we're gonna be talking about the greatness of Marcus Garvey, right? Let's get into it, man. We're gonna talk about the greatness of Marcus Garvey. Now, first things first, I want you to imagine, right? You are a black man living in New York City 100 years ago in the 1920s. Obviously, the world is way different than it is today, and the environment is 100 times more hostile than it is today, right? Now, on top of that, you got to think about the fact that there are no smartphones, right? There is no instant messaging. There is no FaceTime. There is no Facebook. There is no Twitter. There is none of that, right? There's no way to hop on YouTube and do a live stream and connect with a worldwide audience. No, you had to write letters, and sometimes that took weeks and months to reach the destination. You couldn't simply hop on a YouTube live stream or go on your Twitter spaces and make an announcement. No, you had to actually print newspapers. You had to actually go outside. You had to actually touch the pavement every single day and talk to the people face to face and shake hands and get the word out, get the message out. Then you got to think about transportation. There was no Boeing 737s back in those days. There was no American Airlines book a flight on a smartphone back in those days. There was no high-speed trains back in those days. There was no Uber back in those days. There was no Tesla electric vehicles back in those days. No, you had to hop on a damn horse and carriage back in those days. And if you wanted to travel internationally, yeah, you couldn't go to the airport. You had to hop on the ship. Now think about how more difficult it was back in those days to start a simple business or an enterprise, right? Now compare that to today, where you could launch a website, right? You could go on social media, Twitter, Instagram, and promote your business online without leaving the house. Where in the modern day, you could actually go to the bank as a black man and get a loan, right? You could actually go, on PayPal, and if you're qualified for a loan, they'll give you up to $100,000 without leaving the house. You see, back in those days, in the days of Marcus Garvey, he wasn't going down to the bank and qualifying for a loan. The white man wasn't giving him no loans back in those days. And that's what we got to remember when we talk about Marcus Garvey. When you think about everything I just mentioned, it really puts his achievements into perspective, right? Because you have black men in the modern day, right? With all the advantages that I just mentioned, all the resources and amenities, which means that we should be accomplishing 10 times, 20 times, 100 times more than Marcus Garvey accomplished 100 years ago. Now, when it came to Garvey got it popping in Harlem, New York, right? New York City always been a melting pot of black folks. It's always been like that, man. You're gonna find so many nations, and it was so many nations of black folks involved in Marcus Garvey's movement, man. You had African Americans, you had black Caribbeans, you had continental Africans that was clicking up with Garvey back in the early 1900s, bro. And like I said, keep in mind, wasn't no social media, wasn't no YouTube live streams, wasn't no Instagram, Twitter. No, my man had to connect with black men and women all across the world with none of these resources. And Garvey's message and ideology resonated with black men and women across the world at such a high level that within a few years of starting the movement, he was already millions upon millions of members deep in the UNIA. And there's a certain falsehood and fabrication going around on Marcus Garvey saying that his movement was only popping in the United States or it was only popping on the East Coast, New York City. Garvey's movement was worldwide, right? In over 40 countries and over 38 states. And over 100 years later, there still hasn't been another black man to do it as big as Marcus Garvey. When Marcus Garvey held his conventions, like when he held that big convention in Madison Square Garden, it was black people from all across the world that came into the city for that. That wasn't just a New York City event. That wasn't just a Harlem event. That was a worldwide black event. And then you got to think about the economic power that Marcus Garvey had, especially at a time, like I said, it was very hostile, to be a black man. The environment was very hostile against the black man, right? But Garvey controlled large amounts of land, hotels, lodging, grocery stores, factories, printing presses, media. I mean, Marcus Garvey was going crazy, bro. Marcus Garvey was going crazy, man. And then you got to think about the advancements in healthcare that he made, right? The establishment of the Black Cross Nurses. Take a look up on the screen. The Black Cross Nurses was an international organization of nurses which was founded in 1920 based upon the model of the Red Cross. The organization was the women's auxiliary of the UNIA and the African Communities League, and was established to provide health services and education to people of African descent. Henrietta Vinton Davis was an elocutionist, dramatist, and an impersonator. In addition to being the premier actress of all 19th century black performers on the dramatic stage, Davis was proclaimed by Marcus Garvey to be the greatest woman of the Negro race today. The lead up to the Black Cross Nurses is the 1918 flu pandemic that Marcus Garvey realized left Africans medically unprotected and defenseless. As such, the concept of a hands-on medical first aid organization was developed. Lady Henrietta Vinton Davis first learned of the work of the Honorable Marcus Garvey and the UNIA while traveling the Caribbean in 1917 and 1918. She was so impressed with Garveyism that in 1920, at the age of 60, she gave up her stage career to work full-time for the UNIA. She would become the organization's first international organizer, a director of the Black Star Line, and the second vice president of the Negro Factories Corporation. She was also one of the signatories of the Declaration of the Rights of the Negro Peoples of the World at the UNIA First International Convention in New York City in August 1920. Most importantly, she founded the Universal Black Cross Nurses in Philadelphia in 1920. The Black Cross Nurses served as the women's auxiliary of the UNIA, placing women in a supportive role, while the men's auxiliary, the African Legion, served in a protective role. Garvey wanted everyone in the UNIA to feel like they belonged in the organization, and the Black Cross Nurses served that purpose for the women. Local chapters were established with a matron head nurse, a secretary, and a treasurer to provide health services and hygiene education to Black people. Few programs existed which would admit people of African descent into nursing training at the time, and many health facilities provided unequal care to Black people. One of the goals of the Black Cross Nurses was addressing these discrepancies. Black doctors, Black nurses, and Black lay practitioners took courses ranging from 6 months to a year to make sure that standardized care was being given. See, Garvey was ahead of his time, right? Garvey was 100 years ahead of his time, because still in the modern day, in 2024, you still have Black people complaining about the level of care they receive in white hospitals, still complaining about the discrepancy in the maternal death rate for Black women, right? But Marcus Garvey already knew the solution to the problem. Do for self. Start your own shit. That's always been a solution. Do for self has always been a solution. Collaborate and work together has always been a solution. Anyways, let's continue. In the United States, many African Americans who had served in the military refused to return to their more subservient role in society, and throughout 1919, there were various racial clashes throughout the country. The government feared that African Americans would be encouraged toward revolutionary behavior following the October Revolution in Russia. And in this context, military intelligence ordered that Major Walter Loving investigate Marcus Garvey. Loving's report concluded that Garvey was a very able young man who was disseminating clever propaganda. The Bureau of Investigation's J. Edgar Hoover decided that Garvey was politically subversive and should be deported from the United States of America. Now, when you want to examine the power, influence, and the effectiveness of a Black man, just examine what type of enemies that he makes. Just examine who his enemies are, right? So when you examine the sheer magnitude of Garvey's movement, man, that sent shockwaves through the white power structure during that time, bro. Back in the 1920s, bro. You got to think about it. Back in the early 1920s, you know, Jim Crow, segregation, white supremacy, temperature on 100%. And then you got Black men in New York City establishing their own economy, right? Establishing their own newspaper, distributing their own media, manufacturing their own products, providing goods and services to their own community, circulating their dollars amongst themselves. You got Black men walking up and down the street confidently in their tailored suits, you know, in their luxury automobiles, in their horse and carriages. You got Black men dressed in military regalia, armed with weapons, just in case a white supremacist want to get crazy, you know, we put a bullet in his brain. But keep in mind, we didn't have the weapons for aggression. We had the weapons for self-defense, self-protection. So of course, that imagery and that energy of self-sufficiency, man, you already know the white man was mad, man. You know the white man was hating on the Black man, bro. You had Black men establishing their own enterprises, owning land, owning whole blocks of land, bro. It was just crazy, bro. Niggas was going crazy, bro. Take a look up on the screen. Garvey also organized the African Legion, a group of uniformed men who would attend UNIA parades. A secret service was formed from Legion members, providing Garvey with intelligence about group members. The formation of the Legion further concerned the FBI, the Bureau of Investigation, who sent their first full-time Black agent, James Wormley Jones, to infiltrate the UNIA. In January 1920, Garvey incorporated the Negro Factories League, through which he opened a string of grocery stores, a restaurant, a laundry, and a publishing house. Now, when it comes to Garvey, one of my favorite things that Garvey established was the African Legion, which was basically the militia arm of the organization, right? That was the private military of the organization. So when the white man was coming around with the Ku Klux Klan, or when the white man was coming around with the White League, or when the white man was coming around with the Black Legion, his private military terrorist organizations, we had the African Legion. So if a white supremacist want to get crazy, I swear to God, when it comes to Garvey, we'll pop you, bro. I swear to God, come to Harlem and try to get crazy with the African Legion, or I swear to God, nigga, we'll pop you. So obviously, you already know, when the FBI seen this, they was like, yeah, we got to get this guy up out of here, man. J. Edgar Hoover was like, listen, folks, this Marcus Garvey guy, this Marcus Garvey is a serious problem, man. He's way too confident, man. He has this movement. He has this movement in New York City. Can you believe it? Black people, coming together, uniting. Like, bro, we can't, not in my America. He's talking about taking the blacks to Africa. Doesn't he know that we're currently colonizing Africa? He can't go to Africa. Africa's for us. What's wrong with this Marcus Garvey guy? He's talking about independence and self-sufficiency and self-defense and separating from America. The nerve of this guy, man. He has black men wearing suits, expensive suits. I see black men in Harlem driving cars, riding horse-drawn carriages, man. Like, this is unbelievable, man. Don't even get me started on the African Legion. Black men in military formation. What is going on, man? What is going on in the United States of America, bro? See, when it comes to Garvey, J. Edgar Hoover, he was having panic attacks. And man, we didn't even talk about the Negro World, right? The Negro World newspaper, man. Take a look up on the screen. The Negro World was the newspaper of Marcus Garvey's UNIA organization. Founded by Garvey and his wife, Amy Garvey, the newspaper was published weekly in Harlem and distributed internationally to the UNIA chapters in more than 40 countries. Distributed weekly at its peak, the Negro World reached a circulation of 200,000. Now listen, Marcus Garvey understood that the black man had to control his own narrative. The black man had to control his own media. The black man had to control his own propaganda. You can't leave it into the hands of our adversaries to control our media and control our propaganda. See, Garvey was ahead of his time because y'all still having these redundant conversations that Marcus Garvey was already having 100 years ago, talking about establishing your own media, establish your own hospitals, establish your own businesses. See, Garvey was already thinking and doing this shit 100 years ago with none of the technology we have today. And also, like I said, going back to the common misconception that Garvey's movement was limited to the United States or limited to New York City or limited to the East Coast, and he was never able to gain any relevance outside the country, which that is false because Garvey was connected with high-ranking black men all across the world, right? Take a look right here on the screen. Right to the left, I believe that is George Mark, and I believe that's a gentleman from the Caribbean. And then in the middle, you got Prince Kojo from Dahomey, the kingdom of Dahomey in West Africa, right? And then you got Marcus Garvey to the right. So this right here in the middle is an African prince. This is African royalty right here. He had continental African royalty in the middle of Harlem, New York City. So we can't listen to these individuals who try to spread the false propaganda that Garvey wasn't able to get any relevancy outside the country. Marcus Garvey was an international black giant, all right? He was not a local joker. Marcus Garvey was an international black giant. He wasn't just a leader for black folks in America. Marcus Garvey was a global black icon during his time. And still to this day, he's still a global black icon, right? His influence didn't just stay in America. It reached the shores of Africa. You had African royalty hopping on boats to come to Harlem, New York to come meet him in person and shake his hand. And keep in mind, like I said before, there wasn't no Instagram. There wasn't no instant messaging. You couldn't just hop into DMs or send an email. There wasn't no international callings. No, there wasn't no YouTube live streams. You had to communicate the old-fashioned way. You had to get a paper, you had to get a pen, and you had to write letters. You had to go outside. You had to talk to people in person, word of mouth. And just by the sheer power of Garvey's reputation, he was able to establish relationships with men of high status in African society, high-ranking African dignitaries at a time when the Europeans were making incursions into Africa back in the early 1900s, right? They was invading Africa during this time, and Marcus Garvey was making connections with men of high status on the continent. And over 100 years later, still ain't been a black man to do it as big as Marcus Garvey. And y'all got all the cell phones. Y'all got airplanes and technology. You got, man, look at all the resources at your disposal. And the black man still hasn't done it bigger than Marcus Garvey after 100 years. So put some respect when you talk about Marcus Garvey. Listen, when you talk about Marcus Garvey, put some respect on his name, especially due to the fact that there still hasn't been another black man to do it ever as big as Marcus Garvey did it ever since he was alive. Now, apart from the economic genius of Marcus Garvey, apart from the African Legion, apart from the Black Cross nurses, apart from, the newspapers and the factories and the grocery stores and the laundromat and the hotels and the property and the land and, apart from all the greatness that I mentioned before, another reason why I got respect for Marcus Garvey is he was also engaged in international diplomacy. Take a look up on the screen. After the First World War, President Woodrow Wilson declared his intention to present a 14-point plan for world peace at the Paris Peace Conference. Garvey joined various African Americans in forming the International League for Darker People, a group which sought to lobby Wilson and the conference to give greater respect to the wishes of people of color. Their delegates, nevertheless, were unable to secure the travel documentation. At Garvey's prompting, the UNIA sent a young Haitian, Eliezer Cadet, as its delegate to the conference. Despite these efforts, the political leaders who met in Paris largely ignored the perspectives of non-European people, instead reaffirming their support for European colonial rule. So like I mentioned before, Garvey's movement was not limited to Harlem. It wasn't limited to New York City. It wasn't limited to the United States. Garvey was an international black giant. He was an international black man. He didn't simply just want to be a businessman. He wanted black men and women to have a voice when it comes to international affairs. Now, obviously, during that time in the 1920s, the Europeans making incursions into Africa, right? They wasn't trying to hear what the black man had to say, unfortunately. But still, Garvey still sent delegates to these international meetings so black men and women could have a voice and a seat at the table. And as you can see, Garvey's movement reach all over the world, man. You had continental Africans, you had Haitians, you had Jamaicans, you had African Americans, you had Caribbeans. I mean, bro, this was an organization, like I mentioned before. It spanned over 38 states in over 40 different countries, man, and multiple continents. So don't listen to these guys like Tariq Nasheed talking about, oh, it's because of us, we made Garvey. Man, stop embarrassing yourself, man. Stop embarrassing yourself and your people, man. Man, y'all got to get that boy in check, man. He embarrassing the hell out y'all, man. But anyways, let's continue. Another reason I got respect for Garvey is he was able to bridge the gap between the streets and the so-called black bourgeoisie. For example, take a look up on the screen. Casper Holstein was a prominent New York City mobster who was involved in the Harlem numbers racket during the Harlem Renaissance, right? And he was from the Virgin Islands. So like I said, this was an international, black movement. Let's continue. Holstein was a major donor towards charitable purposes such as building dormitories at black colleges as well as financing many of the neighborhood artists, writers, and poets during the Harlem Renaissance. He bought the mortgage on the New York Hall for the UNIA and allowed it to continue to be used as the Black Function Hall until the Marcus Garvey organization collapsed. So listen, Marcus Garvey even had the street niggas, even had the street dudes, part of the organization taking their street money and putting it into black empowerment. You know what I'm saying? He had the street niggas talk about, listen, I put the money, I got the bread right now, bro. What you need, 100 stacks? Shit, I got you. I'll bring it out the closet right now. So listen, man, like I said, there hasn't been another black man to do it as big, to do it as major as Marcus Garvey. I'm serious, bro. There's two black men over the past 2 centuries that nobody has ever done it bigger than them. Number 1, King Henry Christophe, the King of Haiti. Number 2, Marcus Garvey. There hasn't been any other black man in the last 2 centuries to really be the physical incarnation of black empowerment to this high of a level. Of course, we got black men that have done amazing things. But when it comes to these 2 black men, they've done things that we have never seen ever since. Now, anyways, man, it's your boy Neferkar, that's Salim, back at the Billy, yes indeed. Cash App in the description, man. Support the channel, man. Support the album. Peace.
No. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I'm eating no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news. Back in my city, they loving me. Standing alone, I'm 100 deep. Enemy plotting and still in reach. They try to make sure that we underneath. Trying to make sure that we never make it. Coming for power, come get acquainted. Coming for everything that I wanted. Feeling like Drake, but I really wrote it. Feeling like Kendrick, I'm checking names. Gotta roll up while I go insane. Got so much stress, I've been gained away. Stuffing these racks in this Louis case. One thing for certain, I'm about to check. Keep it 100 and nothing less. Stick with the family since day one. Had to stay down till my day come. Had to stay down, but I'm never patient. Hop on the mic and I'm motivated. Hop on the mic and I drop a classic. Haters can't see me, they copping glasses. Back in the studio making magic. Got a new tape and it's in production. Back on my business, I got a budget. Staying low key when I'm out in public. Feel like I'm 75. Know that your team be full of them traders. You know that can never be mine. I'm grabbing a thought when I drive. I'm back in my zone and we on. She said that she ready to come be my wife. Yeah, hoping I don't do her wrong. I gave her my word and it's bond. I'm whipping the best like a lamb. I'm eating no chicken and lamb. Accustomed to call me the man. I never be up on the gram. I'm keeping that way undercover. She want me to tell her I love her. I told her I'm breaking the rules. I told her we making the news.